and check Plato to see if there's an ideal world and here's the material world. You can't like do a lab test to see, oh, let's check and see. You know, it doesn't work. Neither can you check Aristotle to see that, no, there isn't such a thing. I mean, that's, you know, we have lots of folks that think materialist, empiricist studies are really the only knowledge. You know, even in Kansas, you have people that say, oh, I only want my children learning good science that you know for sure is true. And then the scientist has to point out, well, actually, we're just guessing. All of science is built on hypotheses that can't be actually proved, although you can repeat things frequently in the lab, and microwaves work. SpaceX, my apologies to Elon Musk and the Musketeers, who have nothing to do with his SpaceX program. Let's face it, they did just bring our astronauts back, and you know, picture perfect. They even arranged for dolphins to show up for the landing. I thought that was really impressive how they did that. And then the videos, you know, the support team that was picking up the capsule and everything, everybody was all thrilled with how sexy the one diver was. You know, an amazing world we live in today. You know, the one that clambered all over it and hooked all the ropes up and everything and then jumped off. Everybody was like, wow, what a good dive. You know, stuff. I love our country. I love everything that goes on, even the dynamics that bothers the heck out of people. That's like, how can you get a more exciting life? There it is. There she is. We have the image that I saw. It was interesting enough that it caught my attention, etc. So what is the problem here? Why is metaphysics essentially a problem? Kant is really the one that explains it. And Kant is the one that becomes famous for what he calls a Copernican revolution in thought. And the trouble is I would disagree with him. Copernicus, if you recall, was the one that argued that the sun was the center. I mean, you read Copernicus, you know that he started out initially, as many others, believing that it was the Earth-centered system, and Copernicus had a model where the Earth was the center. But then as he kept studying, he kept coming to the conclusion that really it would all work better if you used the sun as the center of the model. It didn't really get better, though, in calculating where things were until Kepler realized that what we needed were ellipses instead of circles for the planetary orbits. But Copernicus kind of shifted the focus away from our self. In fact, it's considered a narcissistic hurt, right? Because, you know, it instead of the Earth being the center of the universe, the sun became the center, and that kind of hurt Narcissus, us, right? Freud, by the way, is the third narcissistic hurt, when he said that you have an unconscious that makes decisions for you, and that bothers us because we used to think we were in charge of ourselves, and then along comes Freud to point out that, well, no, you've got unconscious desires that you're not even aware of, and those kind of push you into, you know, these directions. So we don't even have control over ourselves. That's I can't remember what the second narcissistic hurt was. That's annoying. It wasn't as interesting, I guess, as the other ones. But in any case, Kant is going to tell us that actually we are the center. We are the center of our experience. So it's not like Copernicus, it's instead focusing on our own experiences. Notice when I draw the Einstein space-time cone. I love the one with the multiple little cones. Where I wish you'd have to look around and find them. Where did they all go? I love the little ones. That looks almost, here you go. This is kind of it. You get the idea. We each have our own little time-space cone. You know, we're the X, we're, you know, in the center here. So we're the observer, and so on. And, you know, occasionally the proximity of others means that our space, you know, time-space cone is close to that of other people. So there's, you know, in a sense, overlap. And that's, but everything from our perspective can be different than someone else's. Time is not necessarily the same. You know, any of those things really becomes a perspective. But why does this go back to David Hume? Well, David Hume realized that if you're a good British empiricist, and he's following the whole chain of people that we've been talking about. David Hume is following Berkeley. Berkeley is following Locke. Locke is following, well, not only Spinoza, but also Thomas Hobbes. So you've got this chain of British thinking that's focused on empiricism. The continent philosophers were considered rationalists. So when you see Descartes, he's thinking we could figure out everything mentally, not from our experience. Spinoza's kind of a split between both Hobbes and Descartes, but then Leibniz comes in full-blown rationalism, and it's all mental events. And so you see the focus on the continent is rationalism. You could figure things out sitting in an armchair if you're just really good enough. Whereas the British are physically trying to experiment, and in fact, some people argue that the best or most important revolution that ever happened was actually The Age of Revolutions by Fareed Zakaria. You might be familiar with him because I think he's on CNN. He has a show almost every day. He emails me once or twice a day. He's just so prolific. It's amazing. And then he also writes books. But in his book, the most important revolution was the Industrial Revolution that took place in Britain. And the main focus of that revolution was the small guys making new things, you know, making a machine more economic or more functional, you know, little devices that these guys were coming up with, improving steam machines so that they were more and more and more efficient, that eventually you could have a train, and England built trains all over the place. Coal was, of course, a help for them because they had lots of coal, still do, I think. I mean, they gradually switched to coal because they were running out of trees. You know, you needed something to burn because, you know, the climate in England sucks, basically, or at least it used to in any way. So coal became important. You needed machines to keep the water out of the mines. So they had to come up with a steam pump that enabled them to pump the water out of the mines. And that, you know, I mean, initially they would learn from the Dutch so they could have windmills and so on, but those were not really that efficient. So coal was really the next stage that created the next empire, and that empire was going to be Britain. And essentially they just blossomed into so many creative individuals that they ended up with this bottom-up revolution that changed the quality of life for Britain, in just an amazing way. You know, Farid loves grass. He doesn't do the charts like Adam Tooze, if you're into Chartwell or whatever. But nonetheless, of course, he uses all kinds of graphs, you know, and so on. And you can see that the British within, from roughly the early 1700s, so this is during David Hume's period, right, up to like by 1850 and so on, they had basically taken over the world because of the GDP of this country. They could make cloth that would be cheaper, and et cetera, et cetera. So, The Age of Revolutions, very interesting book. And David Hume, following the British empiricist, believes that our true knowledge is knowledge based on what we can sense. Our empiricism. So this is empiricism, right? Empiricism. I love pointing out that Sextus Empiricus, or the sixth sense, was actually the name of a philosopher, believe it or not. Sextus. It just means six, right? Empiricus. An actual philosopher. I'm sure his mom didn't say, "Hey, six," because you had to wait till Elon Musk before you started naming your kids after formulas, But Sextus Empiricus. It's the Sixth Sense. And how many people have seen and remember The Sixth Sense, the movie? I see dead people. I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but he's dead. Oh, I ruined it. Shoot, sorry. If you're an empiricist, did you have a question?
Yeah, for Sextus Empiricus, is he another one was basically retroactively named type deal? Because I know there's a number of people.
I can't really answer that question. I would love somebody to someday write a book about all of those names, because, even when I was a kid, I saw the movie Little Big Man. The Indians named people based on characteristics that the person had, apparently. And, Dustin Hoffman was little, but his heart was big. So he was Little Big Man. Is that actually the way people got their names back in the day? I don't really know. I don't know the answer to that. It just amazes me how often a person's name actually matches what they're famous for. I don't know. Good question, though. Maybe somebody's out there writing. I've looked, and I haven't found anyone trying to deal with that. Even when I talk to, Aristotelian specialists, and I say, was Aristotle named that because he, was after, the best arrangement? And they just laugh at me, like, yeah, that's funny. Okay, well, what do you think? And they never want to tell me. It's almost like Nick Begich. No matter what question you ask about what he thinks about what Trump is doing, he won't answer. Does that have anything to do with what I'm talking about? No. But I'm talking with Jack Hickel yesterday. Hickel's son, Wally Hickel, governor. Yeah, Jack Hickel. He talked with Nick Begich and tried to get him to answer any of those questions. Didn't answer any of them.
Was Dad a senator too? He died in a plane crash along with a senator?
Nick Begich is not the son. He's the cousin of the Begiches that were the sons of that. Tom Begich is might run for governor next year, or whenever our next race is. But Nick is a cousin, and one of the clear indicators of that is Nick is far-right Republican, and all of his cousins are far-left Democrats. That's kind of an indicator, I guess. If you're an empiricist and you believe that all of our true knowledge comes from our sense input, remember how that deteriorates when Berkeley argues that Locke is wrong in thinking that there's a material substance that we can know about that we can't know about, because that's a contradiction, right? But then Berkeley, what does Berkeley do? He says it's all in the mind of God, which is total hypothesis. There's no demonstration that this is the case. So Hume's next logical step is to point out, well, there might be a God, but actually, when you look at the arguments that Aquinas gives us, which are cause and effect arguments, the 5 arguments he gives, 4 of them are cause and effect. The 5th one is the teleological argument, cause from, the design argument, right? I mean, I'll take the 5th argument first. As far as Hume is concerned, Aquinas says, how could we have gotten such, a perfect, eye, or the way that the world is designed? It had to be a designer, and that was God. David Hume says, how do you know? And you're like, oh, well, we're guessing. So it's not a proof. And that's the end of that argument. That's all, right? How do you know? How do you know were you there? None of us were, right? So it could have been just what? Now, notice that Hume dies in 1776. We've got Kant and Hegel that we'll talk about, and Hegel basically is in a niche of folks who are all giving us nature and what eventually becomes evolution. And that's the same generation as Erasmus Darwin, who was really already getting in trouble because he was writing about evolution. And Charles then is 2 generations from that. So his publication, The Origin of the Species, is in 1859. So it's already roughly 40, 50 years after this theory of change is really blossoming in Germany and spreading and affecting Erasmus and others, right? So you already get the sense that nature is something out there. You have the invention of nature. I think I might have mentioned this book. By Andrea Wolf. Highly recommend that one too. The Invention of Nature. And von Humboldt is a contemporary of Goethe and others. These are German romanticists, not in the sense that they fall in love easy or anything like that, but romanticism in as the period, where basically people have kind of fallen away from the traditional narratives, still are looking for a sense of purpose, and believe that having an enthusiasm for some particular kind of purpose gives you meaning in life, right? So as long as you're just head over heels into revolution or art, or so as long as you have something that you can focus on, the poets and things, then you'll have a meaningful life, right? But Humboldt is going to go and visit South America. He visits North America too. Sails through the Gulf of America, etc., and tries to climb all the volcanoes along the west coast of South America. And as he's doing that, and also noticing the currents, the Humboldt currents that go up along the coast. Isn't that interesting? Their name the same as him. Okay, you get the idea. He's the one that discovered that the currents on the earth are actually all in some kind of unity. And that, guess what? That the atmosphere is also in some kind of unity. When you go up a mountain, you discover the same kind of plants at each level that you see at the next volcano at each level. And yet there's